So I really would like to welcome Karen, and am excited to have our conversation today. And Karen, welcome.
Thanks very much. I really appreciate being invited today, Heather, and to everyone. And I have a special fondness for Brown alums because I think the word innovation is something that has started early on, and all of us sort of share that. So today, I hope to convey some of my story, but then also some of the ideas that can help you uncover your story, your talent, your passions. I found that there is a central theme to my career, and as industries and locations change, there's sort of been a true north. There's been a center line that I followed. I've worked in corporate, nonprofit, and in between, and I found that the thirst for innovation is pretty consistent and uniform. So let's dive in. So a couple things that you heard some of the mileposts from Heather as she kind of went through some of my history. And she gave you the mileposts, but I'd like to sample out some of the lessons that I've learned. There's a word that I've discovered from each of my stations in my career, and I thought that this is kind of a good way, and you might do this yourself as you kind of figure out what you learned from each career step that you made. So it's been useful for me to distill that. When I was at Brown studying international relations, I learned the tenets of diplomacy, a skill that comes up often when I do negotiations with partners, when I'm on a team, when I'm managing people, when I'm figuring out the cadence and the ingredients of the humanitarian work. And I would say, it taught me to always listen, to see the other person's side of the issue, to pick your battles carefully, and be diplomatic. The hockey showed me the precision of hitting a great shot from the blue line. It's being very detail-oriented in spreadsheets, being under performance pressure. There's just when you know your craft really well, when you can have the preciseness of knowing what you're saying, that really comes into play. I worked many years in sports television, and when you sit in a production truck with about 12 headsets and people out on the field and producing graphics and stats, you are under the gun. It's like boot camp. And so it definitely taught me the athleticism to manage to be cool, to stretch at the right time, at the right place. At Showtime Networks, the call was to be innovative. It was a time when cable networks were just birthing, and the aim was to think out of the box, to be creative with logos and graphics and names and programming for new networks. And it was that boon of the cable networks that just says, go be highly creative. Microsoft took me to, it was a time when Microsoft was expanding their consumer offerings, and we were building things like portal sites and search engines and such. And the translation of having a strategy that we put together at headquarters in Redmond, Washington, and then took out to 42 international markets. That really, you had to figure out how to tune the message and tune the content to each country that you were in. Human trafficking, you've probably heard a lot about it in the last couple of years. It really pulls at your heartstrings, and it's a constant reminder to me of what some people go through in their daily lives. It's definitely humbling. There's a lot of humility in it, and it really pulls at my heart. And at T-Mobile now, we're really disrupting the wireless space. We'll talk more about that. So I think when we talk about innovation, it's always good to sort of say, what do we mean by innovation? There's 1,000 definitions out there. It's used rather blithely these days. But I think this one has a good set of things to consider. It's about a new idea, a new way to see business. It's all around us. It's in nature. It's at tipping points. There are trends that will illuminate innovation. And it's as we communicate, play, and build and interact with people, we see innovation all around us. It's personal, it's professional, and it's part of the digital revolution. And I think it's interesting to kind of go back to what are we really talking about when we're talking about innovation, and how do you lean into it? And this little graph at the bottom sort of says, it's a pretty feisty subject these days. I thought that was sort of an interesting note there. So I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, when you and I were talking about, your very varied career, and I was hoping you would share that with us, and, you kept jumping to innovation. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what innovation means to you and sort of what role it has played in this career that you've had.
Well, I think I like to be on the edge of the unknown, on the precipice, looking out on things that haven't been discovered before. And so I feel comfortable with complexity and ambiguity, and I like looking out and sort of see what is possible. So whether it's, sports television where I was really kind of it was a growing field as Wide World of Sports took us around the world, and the production value really increased, and all these personal stories sort of came out. Whether it was at Microsoft, where we were saying, how do we build new consumer services? How do we use things like email and messaging and search and content to really sort of explore, and then just everywhere. You can look at nature, you can look at creativity, and I see new things everywhere. It's about that discovery that sort of brings me into wanting to be on the edge of emerging businesses.
Great.
So I think one of the things that I found during, I went to a TED conference in the late 80s, and one of the things that struck me early on in my career, having left, a couple of years out of Brown, was a talk by the Japanese artist Igarashi. And he was speaking Japanese, so we were listening through a translator, and he showed, photos of his graphics and his sculpture and his design work, and they were pineapples and watches and years and numbers. And I thought it was interesting when people asked, what kind of guides your vision, your creativity? And he said, find the thread that connects through your life. And here his body of work and his many years of being an artist, which is certainly looking into innovation and the unknown. For him, it was a series of elemental shapes. It was dots, lines, circles, grids that brought harmony and meaning and consistency to his work. And that principle has really guided me and inspired me through my life. It's good to ask about things of complexity and innovation, and it's good to have sort of a center line that you sort of think of.
So what you're saying is that and it was interesting the way you saw your career, there were sort of words that you were able to pull out of that. Is there one word that's the thread for you?
Yes, I'd have to say the word that I land on is often scale. When I look at sort of, the corporate life I had, the sort of work that I've done in humanitarian work, the way that I kind of look at the global digital world that's unfolding, I look at scale. The word scale to me means that it has, bigness, it has longevity, it has globalness, and it has sort of sustainability. So the word scale is kind of the word that I use. And I think this idea of, finding this sort of core that kind of links together all the stages of your career is really good. And I invite you all to sort of think about, can you sort of name what you've learned from each part of your career? And then is there something that there's a thread that connects through?
Oh, that's a good one. I'm going to throw that out to everybody. Brainstorm on maybe is there a word that fits for your thread that you can brainstorm on or think about, and if you want to share with us, great. And then, Karen, if some of those come in, that I'll bring that up as you go along a little bit.
Okay, sounds good. So it's no surprise to anyone that change just abounds. The world is becoming more unified, more connected, more mobile. Industries are changing, massively and rapidly. The Ma Bell system of our youth is now replaced by, 3 billion people on mobile phones. And the traditional careers of manufacturing and banking and retail are becoming digitized. They're becoming modernized. Infrastructure and the cadence of business decisions is just sped up an awful lot, and technology is doing its part to enable it. But think about how we we use, Google and Facebook and LinkedIn, and we rely on those to connect us with information and with people and innovation, and it's just all around us. And I think that's just something that's part of this digital world today. We've even got cars that are going to self-drive. So there's an awful lot of things that can be rather dizzying, but I think that's just the mode of these days. When you look at the kind of the business, the technology business that I've been in, it's no longer just the Fortune 100 companies sort of making, progressing and sort of leading innovation. There's a lot of pure plays. Those companies like Amazon and Zulily and some others that are native, they're digitally native, and they're just starting in a much different place. There's a massive sort of transformation that's happening with most businesses as we seek, any company that really wants to play in the future, and you look at all these sort of scenarios about how we're going to be in the connected home and the connected car, and they're all this digital lifestyle is based on sort of a new way of doing business. It's a new mindset. So that today's currency is, for today's world, is about open and social platforms, apps that help you get things done, and a lifestyle that's built on digital connectedness. And then, you get things to like, it becomes very personal because you've got this idea of the quantified self where you can have, data read out about how you're sleeping, how your heart rate. It's all this is innovation, and it can be quite intimidating, and it can be quite dizzying. But it is definitely here to stay, and I think it's very exciting. So the Internet is all around us, and it kind of bends our perceptions about time being anywhere and where being anywhere. And I like this image that sort of reminds us that while we live in a digital world, it's on top of a tactical one with real flowers and real butterflies. So people often ask, particularly when you're talking about career decisions, how do you make the step from, one opportunity to the next? Do you focus on corporate? Do you want to, are there, humanitarian issues that are pulling you? And, do you follow a straight line, and is it a 5-year plan? How do you do it? And I don't have any particular magic for everyone. I think everyone has to sort of find their own way. But I think if you can be comfortable with the idea that you may go this way, you may go that way. And I think finding those words of what you know about yourself in those career choices that you make really is helpful, because there's a lot of different ways that you can get from A to B, and it gives you a lot of interesting things. I think that the word multitasking and this work-life balance is pretty archaic to me. I think there are always choices. What I do in my home and with my friends is just the same as I do at work. I think it's just, I don't make a huge difference between that. I like to be authentic in both areas if I can. So I think today, the reality is that boundaries are blurred. And, you can be working in the corporate side or a startup or commercial or humanitarian. What I've learned is that all these things fold together, and they sort of, you borrow skills from one thing that you've done into the other. And I like that uniformity, and I like the fact that, everything that you matters gets put on the table. It all matters. And so I have this observation as I've been, in a long career with technology and media and certainly a lot of concerns about social justice, humanitarian. And my observation is that the world spins with technology and speed and wobbles with hurt and injustice. So finding yourself in that place, what do you do? I've found a passion that I became aware of about 10 or 11 years ago, and that's the issue of human trafficking. And as I started to hear about it and hear about some of the stories and thought it was maybe this international problem, but realized that it was here in the United States as well, I began to look into it and sort of say, well, is there anything that I can do with my, thirst for innovation, my willingness to take on complex global issues and lend my hand? And, human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal activity in the world. And it's pretty much the human rights issue of the 21st century, and that's being recognized by a lot of countries and a lot of governments, and we're working hard to do things to end that. I've been on several boards of directors, and in those meetings we talk about profit and loss. We talk about, programmatic programs and campaigns and initiatives and how we can impact programs that will help, voiceless children in the U.S. and abroad. And it's rather dizzying. It's definitely emotionally challenging. But I found that the same skills that I developed in my corporate life were needed by nonprofits and government agencies. There was a translation there. There was all the things about diplomacy and precision and being athletic came into play. So humanitarian issues, have key performance indicators. They have goals. They have 5-year plans. And they need strategic planning. And a lot of those things that I had a talent for in the corporate side, I was able to, bring that to the table. And even though I wasn't a relief person in my background, I had a resonance that could help them with this.
So what you found is that there was a passion that you had, and you came to a point where you wanted to give back, and you stepped back out of the corporate world. Can you just talk a little bit about how you were able to make that switch from, I think, where were you last? Microsoft to, setting up a career in a nonprofit?
Well, I think one of the things that you find by, a lot of my work has been international or global in scope, whether it was, in sports television or creative or at Microsoft. And certainly the issue of trafficking is a global issue. It's not isolated to one place. And certainly what got me most about the issue of trafficking was the tremendous profit that's being made. And I saw the numbers behind the issue. And I saw that it was global, and I saw that it had huge impact. And all those things really called to me and sort of said, well, I know strategic planning, I know how to think large, and I know how to find the most powerful, influential people. And so let me see if I can go, work on that issue and help in that. And I think it was just the thirst, having done a lot of commercial work and a lot of, corporate work. I wanted to try something different, but I was worried that did my skills translate? Did I have any resonance? Was there any way that I could have impact in this issue? And what I found is that all those sort of tactical and sort of corporate skills were exactly what the movement needed. And so, it was able to bring a different lens and a different sort of way to think about the same issues I've always worked on, which is complexity, being at the edge of something that's unknown, having it be sort of an emerging yet difficult issue. And so actually those skills have worked really, really well.
So what I find interesting, and it's a story that people often grapple with, and I hear it a lot from Brown alumni, which I was hoping we could have this as part of the conversation today, is, that they want to give back, or, they are very enthused about, issues and being involved, or, being able to often enjoy the nonprofit ideas, but maybe they don't find themselves on that career path, or, they have other needs or skills that they have set out on. And it's nice to sort of hear that, it's not mutually exclusive. You can have both paths as your life progresses. So then you have been on that path, and now you've taken another swerve back into the corporate world. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So one of the things that I found is really, the words for me, those words of scale, the words of, athleticism, being able to, jump at the opportunity and those things. I got through that through thinking a lot about, what can I offer? And when you look at things of complexity, or you look at choice, and you look at all this opportunity in life, it's kind of overwhelming. The world's moving so quickly. The digital space is just evolving so quickly. There's a lot of need in the world. Back to my quote about the spinning world and the need for that human sort of resonance. And what I found is it's often good in these times of complexity or sort of overwhelmingness to play the one-word game. And what I mean by that is when my dad had terminal cancer, I spoke to him each day on the phone. He was not going to recover. It was a difficult time. It was a lot of complexity, but I knew that he was a very intellectual person, and I enjoyed that about him. And so I called him each day, and we played the one-word game. And I would say, okay, Dad, what's a word that you're thinking about today? And he would sort of ruminate and sort of think about something, and he would mention, like, butterscotch. And I would well, what do you mean by that? And, then we would share this dialogue. And I think if you can take all these things that are about ambiguity and about complexity and kind of reduce them to one word, that you can have something that you can dialogue with people about, is very helpful. When I work in human trafficking, and I go to board meetings that are often include, weekends and Sunday mornings, and you're in places like New Haven, Connecticut, and you ask all these people who are, very impressive people, and you sort of say, here we are on a Sunday morning talking about trafficking and, vulnerable children and all sorts of people around the world, and we're trying to design programs that could help them. And you have to stop for a minute and sort of say, wait a minute, what's motivating you? What are you doing here? What do you think it is? And that one-word game comes up. And so I run around the board and I sort of say, what's the one word and why you're here? And sometimes it's, faith and love and anger and must and, my word of scale. And I think if you can take any of that kind of things that seem to be overwhelming and reduce them down to one word, it helps you understand it. It helps you deal with it. And I think that leads me back into finding the thread. There are some themes that are true about yourself, about your career moves, whether it's been in that corporate or nonprofit side, that do connect through your life, that you can untangle that ambiguity. You can look for the innovation. You can, play the one-word game. It's a technique that I've learned from over and over and over. A second thing that I would pass on to people is this issue of how to listen, because you actually learn more by listening than by talking. And I would encourage you all to try that, whether it's with your kids or whether it's with your colleagues at work or whether it's on a board meeting or whether it's just with your friends. See what they're talking about. Listen to how they're interpreting what they're doing. And then just one other sort of little bit would be people have asked me, is there a particular book or a way or a sort of way you look at innovation? And as I've said before, innovation's all around. And it's something that I'm not, afraid of. I kind of lean into it. I think complexity and ambiguity just kind of drives me. So there's always articles and things that I find. And this one that's called Experience and Mistakes, you can find it. I found it through LinkedIn. You can find it out on the, if you just do a search. It's one that I think has a nice way of looking at everything that you do in life. There's no, even though you may take that circuitous route from A to B and make career changes like going from Microsoft to, social justice issues, there are no mistakes. There are experiences that lead you from one thing to another, and as long as you, have the attitude that sort of says, wow, what did I learn from that opportunity? How do I language it? What's the word I would use about it? I think that can help be a guiding post. I hope that sort of helps people to understand or think about, each one of the career steps that you've taken in your career. Can you find a word that describes it, and then can you realize how valuable that is to the next step that you take?
So I'm getting a few questions, Karen, about actual, innovation and being able to work through the innovation, and how do you actually lean into it if it's not your natural habitat. So I think it's great to say that you're going to talk a little bit about that now. And if it doesn't answer some of our questions, I'll keep bringing them up.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And it's going to be different for everyone. I can only tell you what I've discovered in life, and I can there are some tactics that I've learned that have helped me. And I think, a couple of them are here. I think this idea of change is always around, and innovation to me is more of an attitude that you take. I would say, run towards change. Don't be afraid of it. You're not obsolete. You're part of whatever career position that you have taken in life. And so, I studied international relations. I spent 3 years in Germany. I landed at Microsoft. I didn't know technology, but I knew the international side. When I was at Showtime, I was, it was the time to be creative, to think out of the box. My love of music and architecture and discovering new things came right into play. And so I think it's, innovation is more of an attitude. Things like businesses and companies and software may change, but some of the things that you've learned along the line, like, diplomacy or precision, don't change. Sports television had a role that I use today in my work, being athletic to embrace new digital platforms, new apps. The work that I have done in trafficking has given me, a more humility and heart as you listen to people. So this idea of innovation, I just find it's an eagerness to kind of discover new things. It's what keeps me fresh, what keeps my passions going. A lot of people talk about ambiguity and how insecure they feel, or they don't know how to get out of it. And I think what I have learned is that if you take any issue of complexity, say, a product that you're trying to launch in a business, or a campaign that you're trying to run internationally, and you just break it down into its smallest parts, what do you know? What do you don't know? Just put it on a piece of paper. How do you start? There's always something that you can start with, so that when you actually put it down and use those words, which I like to find in certain situations, and put them down on a piece of paper, you actually say, I actually know more about this than I thought, and you can unravel that ambiguity kind of piece by piece, and then the jigsaw puzzle will start to fall into place. So I would say, don't be afraid of ambiguity. Don't, run towards innovation, run towards change. There's always things from your past and your career that, if you language them, can come into a good role in whatever you're doing, and see yourself as kind of an agent of change. There's many, many times where, we're standing up new businesses, or we're trying new things, and I always say, would I use that product? Would my kids like it? Would my friends laugh at it? And, you're your own best focus group, and you are an agent of change.
So when for a lot of people, innovation means that it will take away, processes, or maybe, parts of their job, and it will affect them in a lot of ways. So what I'm hearing is that, the best thing we can do is to sort of find our unique skills and our passions, and then see how they move through some of the innovations. But then there's always going to be lots to try and sift through. And now, as you're out there in that world of innovation, can you talk maybe a little bit about some of the specifics that are coming down the pike, and what you think people should pay attention to, and what they should ignore?
Well, I think some of the times and sort of places that I've been in my career that have been the most meaningful to me is when I feel like I'm firing on all cylinders. I feel like all those things that I've done in my past get put on the table, and that makes you lean forward, and that makes you, feel that you have something to add to the story, and you have confidence, and you have passion towards it. So, reviewing what you've done in your history, finding those one words, finding those threads in your life have been really important to me. There's some things in innovation. I mean, go back to what we think innovation is. It's all around us, and so I think, like I said, it's more of an attitude and a sense of what can we discover today? What's going to happen, is there going to be a new idea? Is there a new product? There's just, innovation is present in everything that we do. There's a lot of us who work in things that are, you're going to roll out mass products for people, but you can find innovation in nature, you can find it in music, you can find it in simply being creative. And so that's why I think, if you focus on leaning into innovation and you have a thirst for it, and then it will help you, jump a little higher, lean a little further, and go into that sort of area that's unknown with optimism and with sort of eagerness. So I like complexity and figuring out the puzzle and the discovery of the unknown and new ideas. To me, I borrow things that I see from my daily life, and I try to be alert to it, to things that I'm trying to sort of shift big cycles to help lots of people.
So are you bringing in things into, so as your work at T-Mobile, as you look at innovation and strategy, are there certain trends that you like to follow? Are there things that you're pulling in that might be helpful to the people on the call?
Yeah, I think this, what I do is probably what many people have heard from other places, is that try to get into telling stories. And the more that you can sort of find something that happened at, Starbucks coffee when you had a conversation with somebody, usually comes into play. But if you can, when you're trying to figure out strategy, which is something that's repeatable and sustainable and sort of, it's got a lot of demands on it, and you look at innovation, which is more, free and open and sort of invigorating, if you can tie those two together by telling stories of things that you've seen that everybody can resonate with. And it may be something that you saw, something in nature, or you had a conversation with someone, or there's a story you tell about, like I tell about my dad with the word butterscotch, and something that keeps people, that they can understand what you're saying. Because I think there's a lot of communication gaps when it comes to what people think is a good idea and what is not a good idea. And if you can get good at telling stories and conveying things in sort of universal terms or personal terms that you've experienced, it's that storytelling that says, oh yeah, I felt that before, I've seen that before. I think that's an important thing, and I think that's why I focus so much on the thread and the words and the one words and things like that are pretty, can help you tell stories as you're trying to define sort of new, product opportunities, if you will.
So a couple of people are saying, so it sounds like some of your methods in evaluating all the work processes and where the innovation is going to fit in is to be, quite reflective. Is there a certain tool, or is there a method that you learned along the way that you found? You talked about the one-word principle. Is there any other tools that you've used?
Well, I like to go walking and running. I think I don't take, any music or anything like that. I just try to get out in nature. I think that's what helps me just, be alone and think. The second thing I found is that when I get overwhelmed with, deadlines and pressures and, come up with that strategy and make it stick and convince people, I often find, this may be a little silly to people, but I find I really need to be creative. I need to go home and take 4 hours to make an unusual strawberry cake, or I need to sketch, or I need to somehow get that creative spirit out, because it allows me to focus and it allows me to tune out all that noise that I've got to deal with. And so being creative, I've learned that, getting out in nature, running, walking, that kind of stuff, being alone is a great distraction. And I found that being creative, and that can be a myriad of things. I like to travel a lot, and I like to, do gardening, and I like to cook and stuff like that. And if you can find something where you feel very creative and really do a great job at making that best cake that you can ever make, and it gets back to kind of that kind of precision and focus and tuning other things out, that just kind of keeps me like, well, at least today I didn't solve, everything about human trafficking, or I didn't ship, 3 billion new mobile phones, but I made a great cake.
So you're talking a lot about how you have managed through the innovations, but a lot of people are wanting to hear, since you've been in so many industries that have moved through innovations, which ones that you've seen sort of worked, which haven't worked, what you see coming down the pike, how you used innovation to improve working in the nonprofit world. Do you have any examples of maybe ways that you were able to use innovation to improve that ability to help people, and how maybe T-Mobile is really, uncovering or moving innovation?
Well, I think I just go back to innovation being sort of an attitude, and I think if you want to have impact, you want to do things at scale, you want to be disruptive, you want to do things a new way, you want to see things a new way. I mean, innovation doesn't just happen to you. It's a way that you look at stuff. And so I think you can uncover it and sort of say, well, that's interesting. How could we do that differently? I mean, I'm a person that probably from my years at Brown that I studied really hard. I had to know a lot of material. I have to, I can't leave a stone unturned. And so I just have that thirst about knowledge and kind of, there must be a different way to look at this. There must be something new. I don't want to miss anything. And so I often start, when I take an idea, I take everything that I know, I research as much as I can, and I make what I call, I mean, a lot of people use PowerPoint, I do a lot, or a Word doc, and I write a fat document. And I just write everything that I know and don't know, and I try to organize it. And by the simple process of writing something down, whether it's about, how do we stand out in the mobile universe? What kind of services are people going to want in their connected home? What do we do about trafficking in Portland, Oregon versus Cambodia versus, what do we do to educate kids in schools? I mean, there's always huge sort of, canvases that you have to sort of fill out. And so I think of all the things that I can think out. I research all the things I think I can research. And I put down a lot of words, and I write a lot. And I write it in sort of a fat way, knowing that I'm going to capture everything. And then I'm going to start chiseling. I'm going to start weeding out. I'm going to start reducing the words. And I'm trying to get to a story that makes sense. So those are my personal techniques that, whether it's been, like I said, products or social justice issues or, those quick reactions that you have to make in life, that's the tactics that I use.
So, Karen, you've talked a lot about that. We've got some great pictures. Do you have any specific examples that you can share with us of some time when you did that and you were able to have, like an impact on something? I know that you came up with there was a big change in the nonprofit that you worked with.
I'm trying to think of a good example that I haven't already sort of touched on. I would say from the trafficking side, let me just pull out one example from there. So, the issue of trafficking, it's global, it's got huge profit margin, it's really tugs at your heartstrings. The question is, what do you do about it? It's kind of all around you. Who do you work with? And what I've learned is, who's the most influential person or the most influential organizations that could have impact. So, it's not as if this issue of human trafficking is kind of off in a corner of the world and not around everyone. So when I worked, I sort of said, I worked to the Attorney General's because I was sort of confounded that we've had laws against human trafficking for 10 plus years, but there really weren't any prosecutions or convictions. And so I sort of said, well, why is this? We've got laws, but they're not being used. Why is this thing just kind of a runaway train? And so we went to the Attorney General in my state in Washington and sort of said, you're going to be president of the National Association of Attorneys Generals. Help us look into this issue. He sort of said, well, yeah, why is that not working? And so Washington has been very committed to passing a lot of legislation that could help make these laws more sticky and make prosecutions happen and figure out why, if they're not happening, what do we do? And so going to the top person with the problem was a good move. The second move was because he took interest, and it's usually a personal interest, but he was in a position to get all his agencies to kind of look into why is this not happening. I mean, I was just a citizen. That had concern about this issue, and I'm like, how do you go to the top and sort of ask people to be accountable and offer to help if there's stuff to do? And he took that little nugget and he, made the presidential initiative across all 50 states, so all the attorney generals got educated about the issue of trafficking. They started to look at their local laws. The nonprofits informed them a lot about what they should prioritize to do. And this sort of spinnaker wind of events started to happen that actually caused a lot of movement change. So, that came about by, trying to figure out what the essence of the problem was, going to the top person, figuring out a strategy that if we did this, could this happen? And looking at it as sort of a business case. And today we've got a lot of states focused on doing the right thing. We've got, education programs that are being developed. It's becoming more of a community concern rather than just this sort of orphan issue.
So Karen, you've given a great example, but I think it's funny because you were really interested in innovation and talking about how innovation is there and a part of your life, and yet when you talk about a lot of your processes and successes, they're really just about your inner core and your way of thinking. So I'm wondering how you're pulling in or moving through all this world with innovations with those core ideas.
Well, I think it goes back to seeing the world as a very innovative place, using what you have experienced in life in sort of new ways, and go back to that chart where you look at the innovation according to, a scale. It just increased a lot, and so I think a lot of people work in innovation. I think a lot of people there's innovation all around them. I think the question is, are you alert to it, and do you feel like you're part of it, or do you feel like it's happening to you? And I think that's mostly an attitude that there's lots of things that you can use your life and your experiences to help discover new things. And to me, I've had a career that's sort of gone left and right and left, but there's a theme there. And I think the more that you can uncover that, the more that you will feel I have command over innovation. I have something to bring to the table. I have talents and skills that are useful as the world changes around you.
Well, you've shared a lot of interesting information today, and I really appreciate all that you've given us. I think you have sparked some interesting conversation about the nonprofit worlds that you've been a part of. I think there's a couple of questions I'm going to send you that people are submitting. Is there any last thoughts that you'd like to share with us before we move on?
I would just say, be encouraged. Be encouraged about change. Be encouraged about what you see. Notice what you think innovation is. It's not the same for everyone. And try to drive innovation because that's what's exciting. This new sort of area of, emerging businesses and things that you can accomplish by your own two hands and your own heart and mind is an exciting place to be.
There's one last question about, moving through these processes did you use mentoring or networking or, people out there to sort of influence your way of thinking?
Yeah, I've always been a big proponent of mentoring, and I've mentored many people, and I've been mentored myself. And again, I always go to the person that has the most influence and try to be very specific as to, if you want 15 minutes of their time or half an hour or whatever, come armed with really questions that you've thought carefully about. And I think people are very willing to help other people. I would not be afraid or, too gentle about, who you go to. I think if there's a story or a resonance that you can spark with that person and you can ask them how did they get through that issue, that's all the better. But I found that, mentoring other people, a lot of people ask me, well, like there's a couple truisms that I found from the corporate life, which is, if you've got some sort of difficult situation in email with a bunch of people and you know that it's just going to go downhill and it's not going to be productive, a rule of thumb is if it takes more than 3 email swings, go talk to that person face-to-face. It's just not worth trying to eddy yourself in email. Those are ones that I give to some of the people that I mentor. Don't be afraid of changing tacks if you find that you're in one line of business or, one sort of career area and you just really don't feel like it's true to your core. Find a way that you can intern or start being interested or maybe volunteering in some other area. I think, those are some things that I've given to mentors and what mentors have given to me, which is just mostly confidence, mostly like, Karen, you've got it. You've just distill it a little bit more. Put it in plain English, and that gets back to the way that I think sort of in that very large fat space, and then I chisel it down to just a few, 1 or 2 words, and that's what's really been very helpful from people who've mentored me.
There are ways to look at some of these ideas with your careers in terms of, creating a vision and moving forward, how to sort of harness that appeal of giving in your unique skills so that you can better handle the world of innovation and the changes around us. If you're looking at, doing some more investigating into that, we have some tools on our sites. We're at alumni.brown.edu. We, under coaching and assessment or networking or job hunting, there's also other webinars that really looked at sort of visioning and, pulling out your unique traits so that no matter how the world of work is changing and growing, you can see sort of the path for you and where to take that. I did just read a good recommendation, and I just started it, about a book that sort of talks about this being the give and take by Adam Grant. He works at the Wharton School. And again, it's about being able to really put yourself out there and participate, but also some of those limits that Karen said about really, using your vision to help you decide, where's the best place to give and where's the best place to ignite the situation. I want to thank all of you for participating today. This has been fun. I look forward to continuing this process next year. And right now I would like to ask, I'm trying to load a poll, that you take a few minutes to evaluate the session today so that we can move forward. I just wanted to let you know that if you're interested in hearing about other career paths, we do have the Alumni Career Spotlight series. Some are written, some are on tape. It's just a nice way of looking at a couple of different career fields and how people are moving through it. As you're maybe deciding on some different careers and, now innovation's taking hold, a lot of interviews are held by Skype, are online, are on the telephone. So to get some practice with interviewing in that, we have an interview stream which actually videotapes you, so it's a great way to see and hear yourself and get that practice. If you are interested in connecting with Karen, here is her contact information. If you're interested in connecting with the staff here, there's some information with us. If you're wanting to check out our tools, you're wanting to check out our Twitter site, we give articles and connecting ideas and information on tools and services through Facebook, through Twitter.